Hirsch, and this is EdCast, a program created and produced by educators for everyone interested in education. Once a relatively small segment of the education landscape, homeschooling has grown rapidly as families turn to it for a wide range of reasons. What's driving the current shift in homeschooling? Are students getting what they need academically and socially? And what do homeschooling families need to know to be successful? Joining us today is a leading expert on homeschooling and a parent who homeschools. We'll unpack the trends and challenges of this growing movement, now on EdCast. Joining me today are Stefanie Palazzolo and Hagit Needleman. Stefanie Palazzolo is the founder of My Homeschool Expert, an educational consulting company that guides families through the homeschooling movement. With master's and postgraduate degrees in childhood education, child development, and educational policy, Stefanie has spent more than 2 decades teaching, coaching, developing curriculum, and consulting across pre-K through 12 in both general and special education. She began her career in New York City schools, where she led initiatives that drove record student achievement. Stefanie then co-directed a federal grant to transform public schools before assisting in the rapid transition to online learning. Inspired by that experience, Stefanie launched My Homeschool Expert to help families navigate state law and build personalized education paths that fit the needs of their child. Hagit Needleman is a single mother of 6 daughters, 3 of whom have special needs. She has spent years navigating the challenges of conventional schooling while advocating for her children's complex health and developmental needs. When her youngest daughter's safety and well-being were compromised in school due to severe medical conditions, Hagit explored homeschooling with the support and guidance of My Homeschool Expert. Inspired by her family experience, Hagit now mentors parents on understanding their children's emotional needs, supporting communication with compassion, and advocating for their well-being. She's also developing resources to help families better understand emotional expression and strengthen communication at home. Thank you both for joining me today on EdCast for what has become a very important topic that we're hearing a lot about. Stefanie, I want to start with you. When we talk about homeschooling, what do we mean?
Well, there is no one quick answer to that.
Okay.
Homeschooling can mean so many things now. I guess one way to describe it would be that it's not going to a traditional school building.
Okay.
And now it can mean so many more things than that. So if you're not walking into a traditional school building full time, anything other than that is homeschooling.
So it doesn't necessarily have to be done at home?
Oh, no, definitely not.
But that's what most people think, right? When we think about homeschooling, that we're doing it at home?
Yeah, so there is still, it's being broken in, every day, but there's still a lot of myths surrounding what homeschooling actually is.
All right, so we're going to try to get to a lot of that. How many children are being homeschooled in the U.S. today?
It's about 1 in 10 at the moment. It's grown, it's almost doubled in the past half a decade.
So why would people turn to homeschooling?
I have families, speaking from my own experience and my team, that do it for every different reason you can imagine. I have families with medical conditions where this is just the right place and time for their child to do something different. I have families with elite athletes that need something that's going to take that into account, but also keep the academic piece going strong. I have people who travel for work and want their family to come with them. Lots of, anxiety and different depression, different disorders that would lead a parent to want something different, even if it's just for the time being. So many different reasons.
I know we've all often heard about religious reasons as well. Would that be a large reason that people want to get away from public school teaching and not have their children learn? I mean, would that be one of the reasons?
I would think that's people's first go-to reason in their mind, and that's actually the least, amount of phone calls we get.
That's interesting. Okay. Yeah. So how do you know if homeschooling is right for you and your child? It's a big decision to make. So how do you know?
A huge decision. And there's a lot more pieces to it than like first meets the eye.
Okay.
So I think having, a deep conversation with yourself and even with your child, especially depending on how old they are, and, consulting a professional is always something I'm going to recommend. Going through a bunch of different reasons that would make the daily, the nitty gritty, either successful or not successful is where your decision should lie. So going through, is my child intrinsically motivated? Are they able to learn in X, Y, and Z different ways? Do I have the resources, the time, whatever is necessary for what I have to put in? What does my support system look like? There's so many different reasons why it will or won't work for a family.
Are there any children who benefit the most or benefit the least from this kind of an experience?
I'd say any child with any sort of special needs or medical needs that even just might need a reset. Sometimes it's not a permanent solution. It's just a reset and back to academics and back to, a calmer self before transitioning back into a school system. So we've seen those. Traveling and sports are huge nowadays.
I hadn't thought of that.
Yeah, that's another huge one right now.
Now, in terms of the curriculum, and I'm going to talk to you about that in a minute with your own children, where do you find out what to teach and where's the curriculum? How do you know?
You can either make it yourself or you can consult an online school, a curriculum company that's specifically geared towards homeschoolers. Districts do give a little bit of help. But it's not like a one-size-fits-all approach anymore. And the problem we run into now with parents is decision paralysis. There's so many different places you could go. If you type it in on Google, good luck making that decision. So taking something that's very broad and narrowing it down based on, like the three largest aspects of what would best fit a family and a child is how we start.
Now, I'm not going to speak nationwide, but I know that each state has its own regulations. Yes. So let's stick close to home for us right now. New York, New Jersey, Connecticut. What are the regulations that might govern homeschooling in terms of, is there a regulation in terms of curriculum?
So funny that you mentioned those three states.
Well, okay, let's hear it.
So it's not, that's not a nationwide, it's actually a pretty good nutshell for a nationwide difference, because New York is far and above the most difficult or the most demanding.
The most regulated?
By far the most regulated. To homeschooling. And then right next door in New Jersey, there's almost no regulation. It's a withdrawal process and that's it. Whereas New York is a constant upkeep of records, of submission, of approvals throughout the year, depending on state and district guidelines and dates. It's completely different, even from next door.
So none of these. So does New York have requirements for the curriculum, like what should get taught?
Most states do. New York is definitely one of them. How you teach them is somewhat up to the parent.
So let's go to that for a minute, and I'm certainly going to ask you that. So I'm going to use the example of the pandemic, all right? And you'll tell me why that's not a good example. So a lot of parents are home with their children, and a lot of them are thinking, I'm really not very good at helping them, and I really can't wait for them to get back to school. And we saw what we call the great pandemic learning loss from the students who were at home and not in school. So when it comes to homeschooling, it's been a concern of mine. How do we know that a particular parent is qualified? What does it mean to be qualified to homeschool your child? Are there any credentials involved, or what makes somebody good at doing it?
Speaking in the state of New York, no, there are no credentials for the parent. But what I find when I'm on the phone with a family is a parent who knows full well that this is something that they would probably like some help with or some guidance. They know what they're good at. They know what they're not good at. They know where they're going to need to employ some help, is usually already going to be the mark of a successful family. I know how to do X, Y, and Z. I'm not so great at this. Do you have anybody that can help with this? Those show the thinking, the self-reflection, the proactiveness of what's going to need to be involved here. So while there's nothing needed, the thinking about like the macro of homeschooling and what that's going to entail is already a mark of of what's probably going to be a successful, homeschooling journey.
Well, let's turn to Hagit and her own firsthand experience. Hagit, tell us a little bit about yourself and your family and why you chose to do homeschooling.
Thank you, Linda, first of all, for
course.
having us here today
Pleasure.
and for giving us the opportunity to share about this experience. I'm a single mom. I have 6 daughters from the age of 12 to 35. 3 of my children has diverse development needs. And throughout life, it's been a real struggle with observing and seeing the difficulties that my children had to go through with not being accommodated to the needs that they have. With homeschooling, this experience was something that I was forced in to do. It wasn't by choice. And
How were you forced into doing it?
oh boy. Okay, so last year we had a very challenging year. Sofia, my 12 years old, she has a genetic disorder. It's called NF1. And she also has severe allergies to pets. And in school, they had a dog. The social worker had a dog. It's funny because everyone that I share this story with, they say, well, why there is a dog in school? Okay, so they use
There's
it
always
for
some pet in school.
right, but
Hamster.
it was the private dog of the social worker who
Okay.
closely worked with Svea on her anxiety. And immediately when I found that, I brought it to the attention of the school and I explained to them the severity of her allergies, not just sneezing and it's not just coughing. Svea could die just from being exposed through airborne to dander. And despite my warning and despite the fact that I brought it to their attention, they didn't really pay mind to it. Every day, Svea would come back from school with difficulty breathing, with sneezing, and we thought maybe it's the weather or whatever.
So you had a real emergency.
Yes.
Reading. Okay.
Well, yes, it was a real emergency.
So how do you know what to do?
The doctor told me not to send her to school. He gave me a letter. I brought it to school. That didn't help much.
Well, so when did you take her out of school? At what point?
So it was about 8 months of going back and forth. I hired an advocate, and it escalated to the place where they kept the dog in school, but they called Child Protective Services on me. And they opened a whole case of Child Protective Services and claiming that I'm neglecting Svea. Of course, I had all the documents to show that it wasn't normal. However, focusing on Svea's needs, that's what brought me to really think about it, because Svea was so depressed. She couldn't understand why the dog can be in school and she cannot. It really brought her to a level of sadness that it was heartbreaking
So
to see.
you saw both physical and emotional
Yes.
concerns.
Yes.
So at what point? So when did you take her out?
At one point, we were sitting.
And what did you do?
We were sitting in school, and we are doing. We have the IP meeting to discuss all of that, and I was so stressed out that I turned to the principal. I said, "You know what? If I had the opportunity, I would homeschool her." And I just said that. I did not mean it. I was so scared because I'm a single mom. And I was like, how am I going to do homeschool? To my surprise, he said, well, why don't you do that? And I said, what do you mean? How this is New York. They don't allow that. I was hoping that he... And he said, well, you can do that. Linda, I went home from this meeting crying in my car, asking myself, what did I just do to myself? And then I took a deep breath and I said, okay, let's focus on Svea. Let's focus on what she needs. I went online and I searched, for, my advocate told me that there are homeschool agencies that can guide me and help me learn about
So you came
how to
across
do it. And I came
Stefanie, my
across
homeschooling expert.
Stefanie, who saved our lives.
Okay.
I had no idea of how homeschooling is done and what to do.
So she guided you.
She
through
guided
everything.
me every step of the way. And when we got off the call, I remember I was able to breathe after 8 months of agony and a lot of stress. I said, I am not alone. And when I started homeschooling Svea, of course, it was a little bit challenging, and I didn't think I could do it. However, something that I have learned, and it was really upsetting because I have learned so much about my daughter's needs and the neglect and what she did not get in school.
Okay.
And the level of education, she's at sixth grade, and her level of education is like second grade. And I turned to Stephanie and I said, Stephanie, I have a problem here. And she's like, talk to me. And I said, well, Svea is in sixth grade, but she is struggling. She's like at second grade level. And then Stephanie walked me through the options
So
that we have online.
I would imagine, Stephanie, that there are other families whose children have been in conventional schooling and it has not been right for them, and they too have fallen behind. Now, you have a video for us, a brief
Yes.
video. Can you tell us what we're going to see in this video?
Sure. In the video, it's a short clip with pictures of us having homeschool in the beginning. And you can see in the video how happy Svea is. And there is one picture that she looks terrified. This is a picture where she was having severe allergy reaction. She was sneezing, and then I went to bring the EpiPen, and she was like very scared and terrified.
Let's take a look.
Sure. Yeah, she was even in the hospital. That's on a field trip we went to the Crayola factory.
So what did we see here? What were some of these shots of?
These are shots that we took throughout our experience of homeschooling.
And you started this when she was in sixth grade?
Yes, last
Okay,
year.
just, I know, just, yes, okay.
Last year.
And
And I didn't even know that we can do field trips. And then Stephanie, brought it to my attention. She said, they really require for you to take her on field trips because we have to do quarterly reports. And I'm like, okay, where am I going to take her? And I started looking around and asked her what she wanted to do. We went to the Crayola factory. We had a great time. We did science projects. And I really started to learn so much more about my daughter, about her feelings, about her needs, to the point that I started questioning myself, why didn't I do it with all of my kids? And I'm definitely going to do it with my 5 grandchildren.
okay, now what did you learn about yourself from this experience?
I have learned about myself that as parents, we really need to put more effort to listen to our children's feelings and needs and to understand what stands behind certain behavior. So today I work with a lot of families because my own experience inspired me to really develop a whole method and model. And I see there's a big struggle of kids don't want to go to school. And the first reaction that I get from parents is like, well, they don't have a choice. And from my own experience, I have learned that we need to learn to our children and to what they feel, why they don't want to go to school, what stands behind it.
Now, how many hours a day, Stephanie, would a typical parent work on homeschooling if it's in the home and not in like an academy or something? How long?
Huge difference depending on how old they are.
Okay.
But this is not, we get this question a lot, and it's not an easy answer because homeschooling doesn't mean sitting with a book or sitting in front of a screen. There's so many different ways that you can incorporate learning into daily life or into your week. And these things do count towards your hours that, your state guides you to do.
So the states do have an hour commitment number. But I'm just thinking to myself, if I want to homeschool, I have to think to myself, how big a commitment is this for me? So for you, how many hours a day would you say, even going on a field trip is, a commitment?
That's a very good point. For Svea's needs, Svea cannot sit more than an hour and a half. However, Stephanie brought to my attention that taking her to music class or on field trip, those all hours are counted as the hours that needed. So you don't really need to put a lot of hours. It depends on the child's needs. Every child is different. Svea is a visual learner. We have tried different platforms online until we found something that works for her.
Okay.
And our learning at home is on a daily basis is between an hour and a half to 2 hours. Some days 3 hours if we're pushing it, depending on the level of pain that she's experienced that day. And the rest of the hours are being completed by taking her to drum classes, guitar classes, piano classes, dance classes, and so forth.
But you were still the person who is doing this with her. I'm just trying to get a real
Yes.
sense
I can
of.
give you a more specific
Yes.
example. So, say for her age, right? New York wants you to spend 900 hours per year, broken down into quarters. It's like 235 to give an even number for the quarter, which is a 2.5 month block, and then there's 4 quarters in the homeschooling year in New York. So 235 hours per quarter basically means anywhere between 1.5 to 4.5 hours a day. But if you're doing some sort of program that has you working through the core subjects with 1 lesson a day and some free writing, some free reading, you're visiting the Natural History Museum this Saturday, it's 2 hours, 3 hours, you go to 2 extracurriculars, you have family discussions about health-related topics that are age appropriate, you do arts and crafts in the house. There's so many different ways to bring all of that in, and all of that is a learning experience, and it all goes into your reports to show New York State what you're doing, in your household to meet the needs.
There's one more point, I'm sorry, that I would like to make, that it's not something that you have to do just in the morning or just in the afternoon. It gives you the freedom of really work around the child's needs, and if you want to do it in different hours of the day.
So let me go to a question that has been raised, a concern, I guess, for older children. I always joke that when my son was in lower school, I kind of dropped out of math after 4th or 5th grade.
Most people
Because
Yes.
this is not how I was taught.
Yeah.
So what happens to a homeschooling parent when a child is really ready for more advanced math and more advanced science? Where does the student get that from if the parent is not up for that?
There's plenty of options, but I do have very serious conversations with families that are moving towards high school specifically.
Right, okay.
You want to do your homeschool program in a way where if you need to transition out of homeschooling at any point, you've been doing accredited work that will put you into a school seamlessly. You don't want to set your child back. If there's ever an option, they might need to go back into a public school, a private school, whatever it may be. So having that talk with parents, and then, 99 out of 100 people do choose to go some sort of accredited high school route if they're homeschooling, just in case that situation ever arises, because I've seen it arise, and I've seen it arise in ways where families wish they had done something differently. And so we try to proactively address that and have that not be, a potential situation.
Have you seen anything that you would find noteworthy for us to know when a student does the transition from being homeschooled to entering a mainstream high school? Is that a hard adjustment for them sometimes?
Depending on how long they've been out, yes. And that's another thing, we try to be as honest with families about any of these potential pitfalls as possible. This isn't, a company and a business, these are kids.
Right.
Every single one has, the motto we run by is whatever's best for this child this year. So that could change next year and whatever it may be. So one of them is if you've been homeschooling a while, most people, through our suggestion, and even, parents just know these things, but they socialize as much as possible in various different ways. If you're already doing that, you're already ahead of the game. And that's where things are for the most part nowadays, especially in larger cities. If you don't do that and you've been homeschooling for a while, there are different transitionary programs where you're going into a physical location for periods of time before you just get put into like a New York City public high school, because that's not setting them up for success.
So that would be a transition even if they're living in a more rural area as well, correct? I mean, they always have to make that switch. Is a diploma valid? Do they get a homeschooling diploma, and is that a valid diploma?
Yeah, there's a few different kinds. So you're not going to get a state diploma. Like if you pull out in, New York, you're not getting a New York State high school diploma. What you can get if you're in an accredited program with a diploma track is an online diploma, and it's from an accredited institution that you use to get into college with absolutely no problem, especially nowadays. A lot of things have been fitted to this now.
Okay.
So let's talk a minute, you touch on, and that is socialization. You've heard, I'm sure, that people say, oh, homeschool children, they're not well socialized, or they don't have opportunities for socialization. What's your response to that?
That's absolutely not
Not
true.
true. Okay. Well, okay.
Not
So
true.
what do you say about that?
Not true.
It doesn't even matter where you live anymore. There are so many different community groups that have been put together for homeschoolers. There's sports that homeschoolers could take advantage of. Districts, even school districts, have plenty of opportunities to get all the kids in the district together regardless of where they're being schooled. And then there's also apps now that have been created, online resources that have been created to bring homeschooling families together, or even just community families. So it doesn't matter where, and bring them together in a way where it's structured or unstructured, or weekly meetings or sports, whatever it may be.
Is there any kind of educational oversight, though? In other words, the students in the public schools, for better or worse, take these exams. They need to take the ELA exams, they take math exams. Homeschool children, I'm assuming, don't take any of that, do they?
They do.
They do.
Depends on the state.
It depends on the state. Tell me just a little bit about that then.
Certain states are going to require either a semi-annual or an annual nationally norm referenced
Is
standardized
New York
test.
State one of those
Yes,
states?
absolutely.
Oh, so-
And they give you the 4 to 5 that they widely accept throughout the state. And if you want something different, you have to get superintendent approval.
Okay. So there is educational accountability here, certainly. Probably makes it more difficult to be a homeschooling parent in New York State, I'm assuming. But okay, another thing that people, we're going to run out of time in a second, so I just want to ask you quickly. Do you feel there's any validity to the concern that homeschool children have a limited perspective on things, that they're not really exposed to the world of ideas that they might get in a conventional classroom?
My opinion is that it depends. The success here depends on the family.
Yes.
The family is going to take that child out and travel and go to field trips and have a large friend group and a support group, or they're not. So
Okay.
it widely depends on, how involved the family is and how they set themselves up for success here.
Now we're completely running out of time, and I want to give you each the last word, okay? What do you want people to take away from your experience, Hagit, if they are considering homeschooling?
That will give them a more time and ability to learn more about their children's needs and feelings, and create a more level of flourishing communication and a stronger bond. And for me, the home school experience brought me to a complete different level of understanding a lot about my children that I didn't understand my whole life.
Stephanie, last word for you.
I would just say that education is no longer a one-size-fits-all approach. There are options. And if you're feeling, not right inside about any situation with a child, just, look at what your options are. At least just have the knowledge and go from there.
I want to thank you both. You've been wonderful, informative guests. Stefanie Palazzolo, my homeschooling expert. Hagit Needleman, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having us.
That's it for this edition of EdCast. We wish you all the happiest of holidays, and we look forward to seeing you in 2026.
We'd like to hear from you. Please send your thoughts and comments to cunyedcast@gmail.com.